The sun had barely risen over the wide, slow river when a ripple disturbed the mirror-like surface. A large lion crouched at the water's edge, its ears pricked and eyes fixed on the motion. His golden mane glistened with dew, muscles tense beneath sleek fur, yet he remained perfectly still, as if waiting. The river's gentle murmur hid the child's frantic splashes until a desperate cry cut through the morning calm. The child, no older than 7, struggled against the river's subtle current, water lapping at small shoulders. Panic widened the eyes, while tiny hands flailed for something solid. The lion's body shifted ever so slightly, muscles coiling. There was no hesitation, no roar, just a quiet, instinctual decision. The animal stepped in, pads sinking silently into the wet sand. The child's small voice rose in fear, then curiosity, as the lion drew closer. The current tugged at the boy's legs, yet the lion reached him with astonishing precision. With careful nudges, the animal guided the child away from danger, his wet fur pressed against small hands in a protective rhythm that seemed almost tender. Nearby reeds bent in the gentle wind, the river reflecting muted sunlight, and the world slowed to a fragile silence. The child's eyes, wide with awe, followed the lion's calculated movements. "It's okay, follow me," whispered a rescuer from the bank, barely moving, giving the lion space to finish its quiet work. Minutes stretched like hours until the pair neared the riverbank. The lion's paws barely stirred the sand as he nudged the child to safety. The child collapsed into the shallow water at the edge, coughing, dripping, shivering, but alive. The lion lingered, chest heaving, eyes meeting the small human's in a moment of pure, wordless understanding. The river calmed again, and the lion stepped back, as if releasing a trust he had never known before. The reeds whispered in the breeze, the sunlight reflecting gold on wet fur. It was over, yet nothing about this morning felt ordinary. A soft wind carried the scent of mud and wet grass, and for a moment, the river seemed to hold its breath. The child's tiny hands, trembling from both cold and relief, reached out to touch the lion's paw. There was a pause, a fleeting acknowledgement, before the lion shook off the water from his coat and sat back on his haunches, surveying the river with the calm authority of one who had faced danger and won. The rescuers moved closer now, voices low and careful, but the lion's gaze remained fixed on the child. It was a silent agreement. The child was safe, the wild had played its role, and no words could capture the depth of this morning. The river shimmered as sunlight struck it fully, reflecting the lion's golden fur like a halo. For the child, for the witnesses, and perhaps even for the lion, the world felt both fragile and enduring at once. This was no ordinary rescue. It was a quiet miracle, a testament to trust and instinct, and the first chapter of a story that none would forget. The riverbank stretched in a soft curve, wet sand meeting the quiet forest edge. The lion sat a few paces from the child, chest heaving slightly, tail flicking with faint, rhythmic movements. His eyes, golden and unblinking, scanned the river's surface, ears swiveling to catch every subtle noise. Even in stillness, he radiated presence, alert, protective, and patient. The child, knees sinking into the damp sand, shivered from the chill and the sheer intensity of what had just happened. Tiny fingers brushed against the lion's mane, tentative but trusting. The animal lowered his head fractionally, allowing the child the briefest contact without moving closer. It was a quiet acknowledgement of shared space, a bridge formed in the aftermath of danger. Nearby, the rescuer crouched low, giving the lion room while watching the child. "It's all right, you're safe now," they murmured softly, voice barely above the rustle of reeds. The lion's ears twitched, his gaze never leaving the child. There was no dramatization here, only the rawness of life, fear, relief, and the fragile stillness between moments. Birdsong began to filter through the trees, the wind carrying the earthy aroma of wet soil and fresh growth. The child inhaled, noticing details previously unseen, the shimmer of water on the lion's fur, the gentle ripple of the river, the quiver of a dragonfly's wings. Each movement was slow, deliberate, and filled with significance. Time seemed suspended. The lion's gaze wandered briefly to the tree line, then returned to the child, a steady reminder of protection. He shifted slightly, nudging the child toward a patch of drier sand, his movements precise but not forceful. The child obeyed, trusting instinct more than understanding, aware that any sudden motion could disrupt this delicate rhythm. Minutes passed. The child, still trembling, whispered, "Are you going to leave?" The lion's ears flicked, tail moving once, as if in response. He did not speak, could not speak, but the quiet decision in his stance was clear. The river was behind them, the danger had passed, and now it was time to move forward. The rescuer remained silent, eyes on the animal, understanding the significance of the moment. The lion had not simply saved a life, he had established a profound, wordless connection. Each breath, each small movement, carried weight. The morning sunlight glinted off the river, illuminating damp fur and sand like scattered gold. Finally, the lion rose, stretching sinewy muscles and shaking droplets of water from his coat. The child mirrored the movement with unsteady steps, still holding onto the faint impression of the lion's protection. Together, predator and human moved away from the water's edge, toward the forest, leaving behind the echoes of fear, relief, and quiet trust. The wind whispered through reeds and grasses, birds resumed their morning songs, and the river reflected the gold of a rising sun. Though no one spoke, the connection between the lion and child was undeniable. The world seemed both enormous and intimate, fragile yet enduring, and the rescue felt less like a climax than the beginning of a shared story that would linger in memory forever. The forest beyond the river seemed to hold its breath. Leaves trembled gently in the soft morning breeze, and the scent of damp earth and moss filled the air. The lion led the way along a narrow path of wet sand and grass, paws sinking softly with each step. The child followed, unsteady but determined, eyes wide with awe. The subtle rhythm of the lion's movements created a quiet cadence. Every so often, he glanced back, amber eyes ensuring the child remained safe. The current of the river behind them seemed distant now, replaced by the delicate chorus of birdsong, insect hums, and the soft murmur of wind through leaves. Each sound, each motion, carried the weight of life in the wild, fragile yet enduring. Then, as they approached a small clearing, a herd of deer appeared, cautious and alert. They stopped mid-step, ears pricked, eyes fixed on the lion. Tension hung in the air, palpable but muted, the world waiting. The child froze, heart racing, and instinctively took a half-step behind the lion. The lion did not roar. He did not stalk. He simply moved with measured grace, body low, calm, and controlled. The deer, after a long pause, resumed grazing slowly, returning to their quiet routine. The child exhaled, relief mixing with amazement, realizing the profound effect this creature had on the life around him. A dragonfly skimmed the surface of a nearby pool, wings catching sunlight in iridescent flashes. Tiny ripples spread across the water as a frog leapt silently into the reeds. The forest itself seemed to acknowledge the passage of the lion and child, bending subtly to the rhythm of their journey. The child, noticing every small detail, whispered softly, "It's amazing." The rescuer nearby nodded, voice gentle, "The wild has its own rules. Sometimes, it chooses who it will protect." The lion's ears twitched at the sound, but he made no move to interrupt or respond, maintaining a quiet dignity that seemed larger than the forest itself. They continued along the path, and the sun climbed higher, spilling golden light over wet leaves and sand. Shadows shifted, painting the ground with fleeting patterns. The lion's fur gleamed in the sunlight, each step deliberate, controlled, and purposeful. The child's fingers brushed against the damp undergrowth, hesitant yet curious, sensing the fragile balance of the world around them. A pair of birds rose suddenly from the trees, wings beating in unison, and the lion paused, observing the sky before continuing. The child followed, learning, witnessing, absorbing the quiet lessons of trust, patience, and coexistence. Each step reinforced a growing understanding that this was no ordinary rescue, it was an encounter with the wild at its most tender and commanding. As the clearing ended and the forest thickened, the lion glanced back one final time, eyes meeting the child's. There was recognition, an unspoken affirmation of shared survival and respect. Then, with a soft rhythm of movement, he continued forward, carrying the child safely toward the next chapter of the morning, leaving the river behind, and stepping into a world both mysterious and beautifully alive. The far riverbank was finally within reach, sunlight spilling across the sand in broad, warm streaks. The lion's movements remained steady, controlled, every step deliberate. The child followed closely, wobbling slightly but determined, feeling the steady reassurance of paws that had guided him from danger. The forest beyond the river seemed unusually still. Birds paused mid-song, leaves held in gentle suspension, and the faint rustle of small creatures died away. The lion's eyes swept the clearing, chest rising and falling with measured breaths, until he reached the edge of the water. He paused. The child's small hands twitched in uncertainty. The lion's ears flicked, tail swishing slowly, before he lowered his massive head and nudged something toward the child. It was a stick, weathered by the river, smooth at the edges, resting in the sand as if offered deliberately. The child blinked, confused and amazed. He bent down slowly, picking up the stick, feeling its weight and texture. It was no ordinary token, it was a silent acknowledgement, a gift of trust, of survival shared. The rescuer crouched nearby, voice barely above a whisper. "It's remarkable. He's giving you something to remember." The child's lips parted slightly. "For me?" he whispered. The lion's amber eyes remained fixed, calm and unflinching. No roar, no movement beyond the subtle shift of his body, just presence, patience, and an understanding that went beyond words. For a heartbeat, the world seemed suspended. The river's gentle murmur, the sway of reeds, the faint distant cries of birds, all faded beneath the quiet gravity of that single gesture. The child held the stick close, warmth seeping into his fingers, realizing the enormity of what had just occurred. Then, the lion rose fully, stretching sinewy muscles, fur glinting in sunlight. He shook water from his menere and took a slow step back. The child's small hands still held the gift, and for a brief moment, predator and human shared an unspoken bond, an understanding that went beyond fear, danger, or survival. The riverbank seemed to exhale, the tension dissolving as the lion stepped forward toward the forest's edge. Leaves rustled in the gentle wind, birds resumed their songs, and the child's eyes followed every movement. Each pawfall in the sand was a testament to quiet courage and trust, a reminder that even in the wild, extraordinary acts can happen without spectacle. The rescuer placed a hand lightly on the child's shoulder. "He chose to give you this," they murmured softly. "It's a reminder of what can happen when fear turns into trust." The lion paused one last time at the edge of the forest, tail flicking once, ears alert. Then, without a sound, he disappeared into the dense greenery, leaving the child holding the stick, carrying the memory of a moment that would linger forever. The sunlight glinted off the river's surface, turning the water into molten gold. The child stood, chest rising and falling, heart pounding, realizing the quiet miracle of what had just occurred. This was no ordinary rescue. It was a gift of understanding, a bridge between two worlds, a testament to the quiet power of instinct and grace. The lion walked slowly away from the river, paws sinking gently into the warm sand. Each step was deliberate, steady, leaving fleeting prints that the tide would soon erase. The child remained still for a long moment, watching amber fur blend with the shadows of the forest, realizing that this morning was not just extraordinary, it was transformative. Birdsong resumed, leaves rustled in the breeze, and the faint murmur of the river carried on uninterrupted, indifferent yet somehow enriched by the quiet heroism of one magnificent creature. The child, small hands still gripping the weathered stick, took a tentative step forward, hesitant to break the spell of the moment. The rescuer stayed nearby, voice low and careful. "He's gone back to where he belongs," they whispered. "But he won't ever leave your memory." The child nodded, eyes wide, absorbing the weight of the words. The gift left behind, the stick, simple and weathered, felt like a tangible thread connecting them to the morning's miracle. Sunlight streamed through the trees, casting dappled gold across wet leaves and sand. The forest seemed to hum with quiet acknowledgement, as if nature itself had paused to witness the unusual bond. A soft wind carried the scent of river, mud, and distant wildflowers, filling the air with a richness that felt almost sacred. The child took a deep breath, watching the lion pause at the edge of the forest, ears pricked, tail swishing once, before vanishing into the dense greenery. There was no roar, no dramatic flourish, just the silent authority of one who had lived, survived, and extended trust in a rare, fleeting gesture. For a few minutes, the child remained frozen, heart pounding, mind replaying every detail, the careful nudges, the steady eyes, the unexpected gift. Then, slowly, a smile broke across a face still wet from river water and tears alike. The memory was theirs to keep, a reminder of courage, empathy, and the quiet power of the natural world. The rescuers stepped closer, offering gentle support. "He trusted you," one whispered. "And you respected that trust. That's what matters." The child nodded again, the weight of the morning settling into a calm understanding. The river continued its gentle murmur, reflecting gold and green in shifting patterns. Small creatures began their routines again. A frog leapt into the reeds, a dragonfly skimmed the water, birds resumed their calls. The forest exhaled, returning to rhythm, carrying the story forward silently. The child looked one last time toward the forest, holding the stick like a talisman. Somewhere out there, the lion moved through trees and undergrowth, free and unobserved, yet leaving an indelible mark on a human life. The golden light of morning bathed the riverbank, warm and forgiving, carrying the quiet knowledge that not every miracle needs a witness. Some simply exist to remind us of what trust and courage can create. And with that, the world seemed full, fragile, and enduring all at once. The child turned toward the rescuers, taking a tentative step forward, carrying the memory of the lion, the river, and the extraordinary morning into a life forever changed.